Welcome, everyone. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
joining us here. We have a great panel here to talk about trust for autonomous vehicles. For the acronym-averse, we're going to be saying AVs a lot, I think, in the next 25 minutes or so. So AVs, autonomous vehicles, to just set some terms to start. And while we're talking about starting, welcome. Let's start with the basics. What is autonomy? What does the average consumer think autonomy is? Does maybe Steve back there has a good idea with market research that he does with the CTA?
Sure. Well, I think everybody in the room is pretty familiar with self-driving vehicles these days. And of course, Consumer Technology Association is the owner and producer of CES. Hopefully we'll see many of you in a few short weeks in Las Vegas. But in any case, the thumbnail, I think, on AVs or self-driving vehicles as we describe them at CTA is really that the engineering is far, far ahead of the policy environment, frankly. And so we're advocating in Washington, D.C. for more tech policy that will allow these innovations to come to market. So just like Jon Snow of Game of Thrones said winter is coming, I think the thumbnail for me right now is fleets are coming. Fleets are coming. And so the good news is that consumers like all of us will soon be able to partake, and we've got manufactured service providers that are working on these solutions now. But if I could just add one thing in extenuation, I think when we're talking about consumer trust, I think really what we're confronted with are two E's: education and experience. I mean, and this is in the introduction of this panel. I mean, we're trying something new. We want to learn about it and so forth, and we do our research, and then we might try it out. We get a demo if it's a new device. And so I think this is what we have to look forward to in the next 2 to 3 years as these innovations come to market, these fleets, these services that we've heard a lot about discussed in previous panels, as these commercial deployments take place, is what I'm saying. So that's kind of my perspective.
Right. And maybe, Bert, you could fill us in. Zoox, a self-driving car company. Why full autonomy? Why can't we stop at a lower level of autonomy that people maybe already are seeing in some of their cars that they have today already on the road with some auto assist?
Yeah, Sasha,
features?
it's a great question, and I think your first question also is a really important one because there is so much noise in the system around autonomous vehicles right now. At Zoox, we define autonomous vehicles in the context of level 4, level 5. So if you're familiar with the levels of automation, 0 being no automation whatsoever, and level 5 being this sort of utopia where a vehicle can go anywhere at any time in any kind of environment. We're developing a level 5 vehicle, and we've engineered that vehicle. But it's going to be a level 4 service, which means it's going to be constrained to a particular environment. And I think that distinction is very, very clear as we bring our technology to market.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm Amitai. I lead autonomous vehicle work at SAFE, which is a DC-based advocacy organization. And I think it's really important, as Bert said, to really to separate the conversation around ADAS and driver convenience features at levels 1 and 2, and what really happens at level 4. And what happens at level 4 is really interesting. It's very simple. There's no human expected to be part of the driving task. That means that whether you're a person or a package, you go in the vehicle and you get to your destination without anyone operating any controls. And that's really exciting and interesting from our point of view because we think it unlocks a lot of innovation and a lot of societal benefits. By taking the human out of the loop of the driving decision, you can get safety-related benefits. You can get accessibility for people who have a disability and can't drive. And we think it also helps us with operating our transportation system more efficiently. And the important thing is that a lot of these benefits emerge at scale, much more pronounced at level 4 automation when you're having no driver in the vehicle. And I think it's really important from a consumer confidence and consumer education point of view to keep the policy issues and marketing conversations around level 4 very distinct from the necessary and important ones that happen around driver assist features.
Okay. And speaking about consumer trust and making sure we don't completely bulldoze it, when we give these huge ambitious timelines, when we say we're going to have autonomous vehicles by this time, or we're going to, you're not going to need your car by this date, I guess anyone can speak to this, but how does that affect how people perceive autonomous vehicles? Does it make them doubt it more? Does it make them excited about it? Oh,
yes.
we got another
Stephen, go ahead.
Steven here.
So
Harman.
I'm Steve Serhai with Harman, and we're a tier 1 supplier to the OEMs, focused on infotainment, connected vehicle solutions, as well as a lot of the technologies that go into autonomous driving. But when we look at and we work with our customers about getting autonomy on the road, it's really about doing it in a judicious manner. I think, there were some early statements made about we will have autonomy on the road by XY date. You only get one chance to do it right. And so I think for all of the OEMs, they're looking to make sure that it's being done right, it's being done safely. And part of that, we talked about the levels, getting from level 3 to level 4, where level 3, you still have a handoff that's got to occur between the vehicle and the driver. And that communication is an important part of how the overall solution has to come together. Because you talk about, as you introduce autonomous vehicles, talked about the policy and everything else, and the whole panel discussion is about trust, but really how the vehicle communicates with the occupants, I think, is an important factor in trying to get over that trust curve. And definitely that handoff phase is a critical aspect of it.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, in any relationship, communication is key, but we can get back to that. Did you have another point about timelines?
Yeah, I just wanted to build on Stephen's comments. And so what Stephen, you're describing is really around the second E, experience, that we have to make it good. But so at CTA, we do a lot of research in consumer markets and looking at emerging technologies, and a lot of this is grounded in sentiment. So how do people think about this? But we also go further and look at adoption of emerging technologies and so forth. So what do we find? Well, typically that adoption curve, and a lot of you may know this, is S-shaped. Okay, and there are a lot of variables that really input the shape of that S curve, and clearly there's some inflection point at some stage, whether that's a price decrease, manufacturers jumping in, distribution channels broadening. That inflection point is really what causes the market to grow. So where are we now? Obviously, we're in this very beginning stage, and variables that are going to affect this curve of adoption are manifold. I mean, we can talk days and days about level 3, level 4, level 5, the engineering piece, also the policy piece. There are key ingredients like 5G that are going to be great enablers when we think about V2X, but the consumer doesn't care about a lot of these nitty-gritty details that we as industry folk love to talk about. So when we're thinking about trust, it really comes down to educating people around the benefits. And so that's really kind of the approach that we've taken at CTA with our research. A lot of consumer research has just asked the question, pardon the pun, kind of head on. What would you ride in a self-driving vehicle? Well, a lot of people will say no. Well, of course. Why? Because they don't know what it is. They don't understand maybe the use cases. Well, why would I want to do that? Why wouldn't I just drive myself? I don't know. So they punch no. We approached it from the benefits. Well, what if a solution for your community could save time? What if it would help reduce accidents and so forth? And what did we find? Well, very, very broad, vast majority endorsement of all these different benefits that we as industry folk know are possible because of self-driving vehicles. So what I'm saying is when you look at it from that perspective, this is where the education piece comes in. Of course, people aren't going to jump in because I talked about that S curve of adoption. There's another curve that you should be cognizant of, and that is when you look at the number of people that will never buy a new technology. That curve is U-shaped over the life of the product. Why is that? Well, because in the beginning, a lot of people say, well, I'll never buy that. Why? Because they don't know what it is. And so this is why we're seeing this kind of dissonance, this feedback that confuses us as industry folk, like, well, why don't consumers get this? Why aren't they on board? Well, it's because they don't understand. And over time, that number of people that say, I'll never buy or I'll never use that service, whatever it is, comes down, and that's the saddle of the U. And then when we approach obsolescence like we are today, say, with a lot of point-and-shoot cameras, we use our smartphones. So we're starting to see the number of people say, I'll never buy another point-and-shoot camera. I don't have to. I've got a great camera on my iPhone or Android phone or whatever. So that number, that curve starts to come up. So again, we're at that top beginning part of the U. A lot of people are like, I'll never ride in one because I don't understand it. And we're at the beginning of that adoption curve. We've got to educate people. We've got to give them experiences like with Zoox that help achieve comfort. And I think that's the passport to building trust.
Yeah, Amitai, you had
Yeah,
something.
so I want to add something very specifically about timelines. And I think this is a very appropriate date to be having this conversation because in Washington, D.C., the National Transportation Safety Board is meeting about autonomous vehicle safety and is expected to issue recommendations to the industry about how to continue to develop and commercialize in a safe way. And I think it's important to back up and take a step back. And I think industry as a whole has backed off of some of these more aggressive timelines, or at least publicly making these timelines, because there's a realization that in the grand scheme of things, this is a multi-decadal project. The first major federal grant to build autonomous vehicles happened in 1983. This technology has been under development for, approaching 40 years. And so what matters is not whether it hits the road in 2019 or 2021 or 2023 or exactly how quickly it scales, but that it's done in a responsible way that convinces the consumers that they can trust vehicles that manufacturers put forward, and that they will have a good experience, and that the process has been thorough, and that there should be a degree of
So how does Zoox
Well,
handle?
I think the word of the day is gradual, and this technology is going to enter society gradually. I like to point out that there are already automated technologies on the road today. They are not level 4 or 5 systems. To get to trust, you have to have safety. And there is an incredible safety opportunity with this technology because 100 people die every day on the roads. 94% of all crashes are caused by human driver error. We have the ability to eliminate that with this technology. But solving autonomy, solving safety for an unstructured and unsanitized environment has not happened yet. And that is what we and others across the industry are really working on as we deliver this experience for cities, because this really is the policy trifecta. It's safety, it's mobility, and our vehicle's battery electric, it's sustainable. So zero emission for cities.
And Steve at the end there mentioned, consumers don't care about a lot of the nitty gritty, but there's all these safety groups and initiatives and frameworks. I know Amitai can probably speak about these. I think Zoox is part of a coalition of different companies. So does that affect consumer perception of these vehicles, or is it just something to kind of slap onto your name and say, okay, we're part of this safety group, we're doing our due diligence here? How does that affect how people perceive this? Does it move the needle at all? I don't know.
Yeah, who wants to take that? I think I'll be brief on this. I think safety's got to be foundational to the culture of any developer in this space, and it really, really begins at home. You have to have safety, or people will not trust you. They will not get in your vehicles. I think a lot of what we'll see coming out today and over the course of the week related to the crash in Arizona almost 2 years ago will talk about overall system safety. But our point of view at Zoox is safety's got to be baked into the culture. You've got to have a proactive safety culture across the organization, software, hardware, the vehicle drivers that are testing the software on public roads. It is super important because we've seen the consequences.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think absolutely. Industry efforts, coalition of industry efforts like the Partnership for Autonomous Vehicle Education, which is run by the National Safety Council, as well as government efforts, are really important in sending valuable signals to the consumers that there's some degree of assurance, that there's someone who's monitoring what is going out on the road, and the Department of Transportation in Washington does have the authority to oversee the safety of these vehicles. I think this is a complex question of exactly how consumers interact with those bodies. Consumers don't think in statistics. Consumers need to respond to messages, but the fact that there are trusted intermediaries who are involved in some of the safety standards of decision making, I think is something that is reflected in consumer trust, and that's borne out by some of our focus groups with consumers that have shown that the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration, part of the U.S. Department of Transportation, is to a large degree, was identified by many focus group participants as a trusted vendor of the technology. To the extent that they're visible in the process, I think it's helpful for consumer acceptance.
Okay. And speaking of visible communication. Love to talk to Stephen more about what that looks like, whether that's vehicle-to-vehicle communication, whether it's, I know there's surveys out that, an average consumer wants to know that that is an AV driving down the street. They want it to be clearly marked. They want to be able to have the cars kind of communicate with them when they're crossing the street if they're a pedestrian. So I feel like that what we see every day is a big part of building that trust. When people see, oh, okay, it's blinking at me, that means it's letting me walk, or whatever that does mean.
Sure.
How do you guys approach that?
So as the car has been evolving, Harman recognized probably as many as 10 years ago that connectivity to the outside world was going to become of paramount importance. So we've developed a lot of technologies to bring data into the car, pull data from the car, all in the interest of being able to communicate more effectively with kind of the outside ecosystem around the car. This is kind of the precursor of being able to effectively communicate with smart cities and the smart infrastructure. About 2 years ago, Harman was actually acquired by Samsung. And so if somebody knows about connecting devices, it's Samsung. And so with the expertise that they bring around connectivity from an infrastructure perspective, and the expertise that Harman has, not only from a connectivity of the vehicle to that ecosystem, but also connecting with the occupants of the vehicle. Internally within Harman, we don't focus on RPMs, we focus on what we call EPMs, experiences per mile. Because part of the adoption curve to what Steve was talking about is there has to be a benefit to the occupants. And that benefit is increased productivity, more entertainment in the vehicle. And so how can we as Harman help our OEM partners to create more experiences so that when that vehicle's moving down the road and it's in fully autonomous mode, we're not thinking about, do we trust this vehicle? We're either working on our productivity for our office, or maybe we're watching a movie or doing some other type of engagement in that vehicle. But doing it in a way where when it is necessary for the vehicle to communicate with me as the driver or the responsible person in that vehicle, that it's not a disruptive interface, but it's still being done safely, it's being done in a time-effective manner, a timely manner. So that's a lot of what we focus on, is really looking at those experiences per mile and how does that vehicle connect with the outside ecosystem.
Got it. And maybe, Bert, you can speak about what is it like in an autonomous car? I feel like consumers aren't necessarily exposed to the actual experience that often, and if they're more familiar and comfortable with it, like, what does it feel like? How do you order it? What's it going to be like?
From time to time, I get to test our technology out on the streets of San Francisco.
Cool.
It is pretty amazing. When I joined the company over 3.5 years ago, all we were able to do was drive around on retrofitted golf carts that we had put LiDARs and cameras on a closed test track that we had access to. And today we have retrofitted over 20 Toyota Highlanders with radars, cameras, LiDARs, a whole system so the AI can see. And I think this is a really important point. The vehicles of the future are going to be optimized for riders, but they'll be also optimized around machine vision. Cars today are all engineered around human vision. The rides are pretty amazing. So we can operate during the daytime, the nighttime, dense fog, when it rains in the Bay Area, which hopefully will be coming in the next couple of months because we need it. But pedestrians, we can detect a range of different road users that we need to be able to see to operate safely on the road. And you get into one of these vehicles and you're like, oh my God, how is this going to get me from point A to point B? And then it does safely. And it's really amazing. The first time I had the opportunity to experience this technology, I used to work in Washington, D.C., and Google brought their vehicle to town in about 2014. And I knew very, very little about the technology, and they took us out on the highway, and I thought it was pretty amazing. But to actually drive in a city environment where you have to detect and perceive all of these different other road users and do that safely is just an amazing thing. And we've come a really long way, but back to the word of the day, gradual, there's still quite a bit of work to do.
And we should expect this to feel more like a rideshare experience, or I feel like there's a lot of misperceptions of, oh, this is going to be a car that I one day own in my garage, but it seems more like we're going to be sharing these as part of, you said the word of the day is fleets or whatever it is. The fleets are coming. So that looks a little bit different than how we drive around now in our own individual.
I think that's right. So cars today sit idle for about 96% of their lives. We're developing a fleet of fully autonomous vehicles that can operate in an urban environment, and the whole idea is that when you're not using it, somebody else is, and that's much better optimization and utilization of a fleet. It's more like an airline model than it is a personal car ownership model.
Okay.
And Sasha, if I can add to that, because I think the vehicle presents a unique opportunity for us, because in a fully autonomous vehicle, when we look at engaging somebody, and whether it's a fleet scenario where we want to personalize that experience, but even as that vehicle moves around, you're changing geo-coordinates, you're seeing different scenery. It's unlike sitting on your sofa in your living room. It's unlike mass transit experience, whether it's airlines or buses or whatever. So it really presents us with an opportunity to leverage technologies like augmented reality and taking advantage of the geoposition of the vehicle and other vehicles that might be around you to engage in, whether it's gamification or other things that would be creating a unique experience in that vehicle. Because when you look at the owners and operators of the fleets, they're going to want people to spend more time in that vehicle. How do you drive people using those vehicles? It's creating that unique and personalized experience in the vehicle so that it's not something that you can do sitting on your couch. It's not something that you can do on public transportation.
Yeah.
But it really presents an opportunity for everybody who's a part of the ecosystem to create these unique experiences.
Go ahead, Steve, at the end.
Yeah, sure. If I could just build on that. So coming back to some of the friction that we hear about with a lot of the road testing and so forth, I mean, one comment I want to impress upon you is we can't let fear be the enemy of good. I think we all agree that in our society today with urbanization, we desperately need more a denser mosaic of transportation options, multimodal, micromobility. These things are happening. And I mean, look no further than just out here on the streets of Los Angeles and the omnipresent scooters as evidence that the consumers are jazzed about this. They're adopting these different solutions. And I think eventually the engineering will make incremental improvements. The AI will improve. Services will get, like Zooxer is getting great feedback from riders today about how to improve the service and where is it appropriate to pick up and drop off and so forth. These kinds of things. So what I'm saying is I think that very, very soon, as 5G networks start to build out, and we've established that that's a key ingredient technology for a lot of these services, more in-car experiences, as Harman described, as Stephen was describing, these solutions will start to take their place in that multimodal mosaic of transportation options. It's not going to be, oh, okay, now suddenly I can hop into a Zoox car and it can drive me to New York. No.
Right.
I mean, it's going to be baby steps, if you like. So very short range, and we're already seeing a lot of these commercial deployments, very limited in scope and in scale. And the engineering behind that is, yes, level 4 and so forth, and we'll probably get to level 5 pretty soon. So it's baby steps, and this is how, again, coming back to our topic of trust, I mean, this is how we start to build trust. And it's around these initial experiences, and that's how people start talking. And what we find often, and forgive me for if I offend any of the marketing people in the room, but it is still true today that word of mouth is the real gold in marketing. People share meaningful experiences. I mean, social media is a great platform for this, right? They talk about, oh, we had this amazing vacation. If you ever go to Greece, you should go here. I mean, the same thing is going to start happening with self-driving vehicles in these fleets. They're sharing, like, this was amazing. I heard all this negative stuff. It really wasn't like that. I had an awesome in-car experience. I got to listen to the music of my choice. It was fast. It was safe. I didn't have anybody in there bothering me. No awkward conversation with an Uber driver or a Lyft, showing ride sharing and car sharing. None of that. It was fantastic. So this is how we start to build consumer trust. It's not going to happen in a year. It may take 3 years, 5. We'll figure it out. But the point I want to make is that, again, we can't let fear be the enemy of good, because our society needs these solutions. And we think about American leadership on the global stage. there are no shortage of countries that are surging ahead on a number of innovative and emerging tech fronts, including self-driving vehicles. Why? Well, because there are distinct advantages, economically speaking, to those, but also just to be more just kind of down to earth. I mean, think about people with accessibility needs.
Yeah.
These solutions have real meaning. So this is why at CTA we're keen on really championing these services, these innovations that we see at CES and here at the LA Auto Show and AutoMobility. And so, yeah, I think we can expect these services to roll out, but it's going to be incremental steps. It's going to be incremental.
And maybe, Amitai, you can answer this. What about, is adding to the mosaic, as Steve put very beautifully, to the different transportation options we have out there, but how does this impact things like congestion and other, traffic issues, and is this adding another mess to our roads? Is it only accessible to, for some people it might be a good accessibility option, but is it only accessible to people in urban areas where, this can happen more easily?
I'm really excited by autonomous vehicles because they give another mode. They're another mode of transportation. They're a technology that offers solutions by themselves, but I think they need to be implemented in a way that solves problems, that creates value, and I think that's what's very key for it being successful. So I think autonomous vehicles by themselves don't solve congestion, but they do things that are very helpful. I think, but autonomous vehicles are deployed in ride-sharing platforms, and people people are able to use shared on-demand types of transportation. That is a framework that can help us govern towards a less congestion-filled framework that lets us deploy more accessible vehicles. And we also think it really helps deploy electric vehicles, which helps us in our climate, in our energy, in our national security goals, because it reduces the amount of oil uses, it reduces greenhouse gas emissions, and improves the air in our inner city. Automating a vehicle by itself doesn't do that, but it's really around some of the technology that comes along with it and some of the policies that set the priorities for what we want to accomplish with the technology.
Okay, cool.
And I think that autonomous vehicles have a chance to impact society in ways that we're only first realizing. I mean, when you start to think about parking lots become obsolete if everybody's using these kind of continuously used ride shares, there's no longer a need for a garage in a house. It allows you to change the dynamics of green space, but even things like creating businesses and jobs and things that we can't even conceive of right now. If you ask Uber or Lyft, one of their biggest issues right now is cleaning the vehicles in between use. Or, not Uber and Lyft, but the car sharing, the zip cars and things of that nature. And so just being able to develop aspects of business that we're not even imagining at this point in time, I think autonomous vehicles are going to have a huge impact on society.
All right, and to end the conversation, how do we get people educated? You mentioned social media, but how do we get people exposed to these vehicles? Do we just, have a bunch of test rides on the road? How do we get people to even start to learn and then accept that these are coming?
Sure. So I think there's a prior that you're bringing to this conversation. I know we discussed on the calls leading up to this panel, and I think there's been some great conversation here. And a lot of people like to cite surveys that say, only 50% of people are excited about getting into autonomous vehicles. And for me, that's a very glass half full statistic, because we're saying sight unseen, half of random people who are called on a telephone are excited about this technology. So what's really going to matter is that when people are exposed to technology, that it provides value for them, and if it provides value for them, I think they're going to vote with their feet and their wallets to use it. So whether that's through creating a compelling experience, having the right user interface, I think there's a lot of promise, and I think exposure will do it. And what we've seen from demonstration days that have happened so far is that members of the public who get in the vehicle have their enthusiasm levels go much higher after they've experienced a ride in the vehicle. So I think it's pretty encouraging going forward.
Yeah, you've probably seen it firsthand.
Well, and I think it comes down to what my former boss Steve Case called the 3 Ps: partnerships, policy, and perseverance. Right?
Yeah.
We're partnered in some way, shape, or form with everybody on the stage, whether it's Harman or CTA or SAFE. policy, the innovators and regulators have to work together on this because safety is foundational to getting this technology out on the road and to building that trust. And then perseverance, taking the long-term view. This is not snapping your fingers and all of a sudden, presto, you have a fully autonomous vehicle on public roads. There's a lot of infrastructure that you've got to develop in your operating environment for charging and for maintenance. Remote operations, what is the relationship between the vehicle and sort of your remote operations center? So all of that, the implications for land use are pretty amazing. So real estate developers, very interesting group of people to engage with and talk to about this technology. So a ton of opportunities, a ton of changes coming our way. I think we're sort of wired to have the status quo bias in our brains, but we've just got to be sort of open-minded to the possibilities and the opportunities and continue working together.
Sounds good. And for different types of people, different places, you know, we're here in LA and hub of automotive land, but maybe for, I don't know, elsewhere in the world, how does it look to get people on board with AVs and talking about them? Is it a different approach, different strategy?
I think if you look at it on a global level, I think there are certain countries, the U.S. being one of them, that are taking a leadership role in trying to deploy autonomous vehicles and autonomous technology. I think, obviously, for a variety of reasons, weather has a big impact on it. So I think as vehicles roll out, we're going to see some very kind of dedicated uses in more favorable environments, things where maybe you don't have to train all of your algorithms to be looking for edge cases that become somewhat problematic. You can focus more on kind of your straight line types of scenarios and still deliver the same level of safety, but with much less complexity. So I think we'll start to see it introduced in pockets, and LA certainly being a good candidate for a variety of reasons, but again, more of a controlled environment.
Right.
And as a final comment, I think one soundbite I would leave with you is consumers endorse options, but they abhor complexity. And that certainly pertains to transportation options, right? We like options. You know, I can take a scooter, I can take an Uber, I can take a taxi, I can drive myself, I can take a public bus. They endorse options, but they don't want it to be complicated. So partnerships is definitely the path forward. I think that's the good news, is no one is going it alone. Every major vehicle OEM, software developers, service providers, it's an industry push, so it's CTA again. That's what we like to see, industry-driven initiatives to forestall potentially chilling regulatory actions. So that's what we like to see. But I would also add, coming to a city near you. Look for, as I think really over the next year or two, we'll see more of these commercial deployments take place. Again, consumers endorse options, and more education that we have on the industry front. No one's doing this alone. It's partnerships, a lot of marketing dollars pushing forward on this. People are going to start to try it. It's going to take time, but we're going to get there. We're going to get there, and we need to get there as America. We need to get there, and we will.
Right. Yeah. If you see an autonomous car, get in.
Yeah.
See what it's like. Great. Well, thank you all for talking with me today, and hope you guys learned something about the autonomous future that's coming.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.